back. I'm your host, Renata, a creativity coach for neurodivergent and multi-passionate women of color. And in this show, we talk about all things creativity as it relates to our self-discovery and healing journey. Let's get started. If you have been in the world of self-help, healing, personal growth, you've heard about the importance of mindfulness, self-awareness, and tackling our problems head on to help us to maintain a healthy lifestyle. We all know that ignoring our problems and constantly distracting ourselves as a way to avoid our responsibilities is not a winning strategy for the long term. But taking care of ourselves and having healthy distractions is not all bad. And there's a time and a place for this in our healing and self-discovery journey. And in today's show, I want to talk to you about why distractions, ignoring problems, and prioritizing our self-preservation is helpful, how this is connected to our ability to enjoy creativity and art, and some things that we should keep in mind when we want to implement this strategy so that we can be intentional with it. If this sounds interesting to you, then keep watching, keep listening if you are on YouTube, and let's get into it. So I want to start off this episode by sharing a little bit about the inspiration for this episode. And this came from a situation that I'm currently facing, and that is that I have really noisy neighbors. I live in a 2-story apartment building. I'm in the first floor, and my neighbors are upstairs, and there's a lot of noise going on, and it has been a very challenging situation. It's been very distracting, very stressful, and it's made me feel really angry because I've already done all the things to try to solve the problem, talking to them, talking to the manager, trying to get this situation under control. And at this point, I'm kind of at my wit's end, but also I've already done everything that I can. And sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we've already done all that we can, all the things that are in our control, and we just have to let time go by, right? Certain things can't be changed immediately. We have to just wait. And for me, it has been a bit challenging because I want to practice setting boundaries. I want to be able to speak up when something bothers me. And yet there are times when I find myself feeling stuck, and it feels like this situation is never going to end, even though intellectually I know that there's other things that I can try. And yeah, things are not always going to be how they are currently, but it's really hard to shift out of that mindset when we are in the middle of the situation. And so funny enough, I feel like I'm making the most out of right now, out of this really messed up situation. And I figure, might as well make something positive out of it by creating this episode. And really, this is just an analogy, a reminder of what matters and how to move through difficult situations in a mindful, intentional, and strategic way, because this isn't going to be the last time that I have to face something difficult, and it hasn't been the first either. And I think this is a lesson that we can all apply, whether we are feeling like we're in a good place in our lives, or this is something that we want to keep in mind for the future when we face another challenging situation. I think sharing this is going to be helpful. And most importantly, I wanted to talk about this topic because I think this is such an important strategy to have in mind, because this isn't about ignoring a problem, but more so about being strategic when it comes to knowing how to redirect our energy so that we can feel empowered, that we can remember we have agency, so that we have clarity and resilience, so that when it comes to taking action, we are ready and not overwhelmed and burnt out. With this out of the way, let's now talk about some common misconceptions that come to mind when we think about distractions, ignoring our problems, and prioritizing self-preservation. Like I was just talking about a second ago, I think it's important that we get this out of the way first and foremost. And that is that distracting ourselves, ignoring our problems, and prioritizing our comfort all of the time isn't helpful. And I think that we can all agree to this. I think this isn't rocket science. It doesn't take a genius to know this. And it's also true that we live in a culture that has conditioned us to constantly be thinking about maximizing every minute of our waking hour. and constantly being productive. And this isn't the first time that I've talked about this on this show. So it makes a lot of sense that we constantly feel this pressure to be doing something, to do anything to avoid living in the present moment and having to accept things as they are, which is also not helpful. And it's also very normal that we want to escape challenging situations because obviously they don't feel comfortable and they disrupt our peace. So, all these seemingly opposing ideas can all be true and coexist at the same time, although they often get oversimplified. And what we think about is that when we are prioritizing our self preservation, we are avoiding life, when that isn't always the case. I think it's really much more about knowing when to pause so that we can come back to the situation in a much more empowered and mindful way. Now, let's continue to dive deeper and explore why distractions, ignoring our problems, and self preservation is helpful. As I already have alluded to in the previous point, being able to let go of thinking about a problem is so critical, it's so necessary for our well being, for our resilience, and quite frankly, our sanity. The truth is that our brain has limited capacity, and as we know, we live in a very fast-paced world where there's a lot going on, where there's constant demands, and so it makes a lot of sense that at some point we just cannot possibly think about every single thing that we're having to go through and live through. So we do need that space to breathe. And I think that what can happen is that for a lot of us who are overthinkers, who like to analyze things, who have historically felt like we had to solve problems, we tend to get ourselves really stressed out and we want to solve all the problems. And that can lead to emotional and physical burnout, leaving us feeling exhausted and unable to actually solve the problems in a grounded and centered way. Now, let's talk about the connection between healthy distractions and our creativity. Because believe it or not, there is a connection that is not at all obvious. And it's something that I personally struggle with for such a really long time because I just couldn't pinpoint what the problem was. So let me elaborate and explain what I mean. If you're listening to this podcast, you are likely somebody that is very intuitive, that cares about others, that feels what other people are feeling. You likely have been the person to be the responsible one in your community, in your family. And what this does is that it has trained us to be overly productive, to be very focused on solving problems for others. I have talked about how often we feel this need to overly empathize with folks and almost do their emotional work for them. As a result, we get stuck in our heads and we feel the pressure and the weight of having to solve problems for other folks. This leaves us very little room to take care of ourselves and give ourselves a break from the responsibility of having to figure out solutions for others. And what's worse is that this does impact our creativity. It will show up what we want to create. It will either make us feel like we can't enjoy ourselves because we have to attend to these problems, or if we do end up sitting down to create, we feel really guilty because we feel like we have to be the responsible one. We really have bought into our identity as the problem solver. And this is such a huge problem and a big reason as to why so many of us struggle to sit down and actually enjoy our creative time. And I believe this is at the core of our inability to loosen up and enjoy our creativity, to play, because we have been conditioned to believe that we don't deserve a break, that we don't deserve the right to walk away from problems because we always have to be in problem solving mode. Before wrapping up, I want to give you some recommendations, some suggestions for implementing distractions, blissful ignorance, and prioritizing your self preservation. First, know that this is a short term strategy, so be intentional with it. This is about knowing when to use this strategy, not just being random about it. And like I said, it's not about just avoiding things forever. We at some point are going to have to deal with our issues, but knowing when to pause, when to let go is also critical. To let this serve as a way to give your mind and body a break so that you can come back to your life with more energy and mental clarity. Even 5 minutes of doodling or playing with your cat can give you a sense of agency and empowerment. Three, creativity can be an excellent way to distract yourself in a healthy way by helping you to manage stress, anxiety, and redirect this anxious energy into a healthy outlet. So give yourself permission to enjoy it and let go of any guilt. And lastly, a regulated, well rested you will make better decisions and navigate challenges more effectively. So please let go of any worries and pressures and make time for yourself. So the key takeaways are that there will be times in our lives when we need to support ourselves by shifting our focus and ignoring our worries for a little while. It's okay to give yourself permission to let go of thinking, troubleshooting, and putting effort. And it's just as important to learn when to let go, distract ourselves with intention, and give our bodies a break from stressful situations. This is not the same as avoidance, it's self preservation. And finally, creativity is an excellent way to shift our focus, nurture ourselves, and give our mind a break, helping us to reset our mind, reduce stress, and reclaim our energy. We are now coming to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and hit like if you are watching on YouTube. Also, sign up for my newsletter. This is the best way to stay connected and for you to be the first to hear about my latest offerings. And if you would like to explore ways to infuse creativity into your daily routine, whether you're just starting to reconnect with your creativity or need help establishing a nourishing creative habit, I would love to help you. Sign up for a free 30-minute discovery session and let's explore how to get started. I look forward to connecting with you. The link is in the show's description. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you on the next one. Until then, stay creative.